The time is nigh, brothers. Armageddon approaches. But in the deep southern deserts, far from the broken warp gates at the poles of the planet, the mummy returns, and with him march the legions of Nahakara. Settra was bugged harder than the Scarab Swarm during snack time. After the Sisters of Twilight DLC, there was about a month or so where he was pretty much unusable, because he could Terror Route, and he did not behave like an undead lord. Thankfully, that has been fixed, and our boy rides eternal, shiny and chrome, against Hellebron and the Dark Elves of Ganeth. My opponent today is Falcon, and we are busting out, I don't know if I'd explicitly call them memes here, but definitely not straight up meta-type army builds. There's some experimentation going on for both sides. I am playing as the Tomb Kings. Settra is on his Chariot of the Gods with Cursed Blades and Incantation of Protection, two spammable spells that will help grant army-wide healing. While he's cruising down the street in that 6 foe, jacking the biddies and slapping the hose, he's got 100 charge bonus and has an insane amount of killing power, but he is one expensive mummy. He's joined by his pet kitty, the Khemrian Warsphinx, and when the Liger Zero is on the prowl, you do not want to be on the receiving end of its deadly pounce. In the rear are 2 units of Necropolis Knights, not the halberd version. More meta-type build would probably drop one of these and get some Nahakara Horsemen for more mobility and ability to dive into the enemy rear, but they are a super good unit when used correctly. They can do some awesome work. And in the rear are the Memeing Skull Catapults, which are honestly pretty damn decent for the price at only 700 gold. They do not have incredible damage output, but they synergize really well with Terror by dropping enemy leadership, and they can put pressure on Witch Elves and Shades and units that would threaten my constructs, so I think they're a decent choice here. It's not very hard for them to make their money back. Rest of the build is fairly standard, a lot of spooky scaries and skirmish cav to help harry the flanks, but for the Dark Elves of Ganeth come the Raptor Chariots of Doom. Chariots are generally just kinda good in Warhammer, but they have extra utility that a lot of people aren't aware of. One thing you'll see high-level players do with them is use them to pin high-mass units in place. So if Settra or the War Kitty are running roughshod through your lines, Cold One Chariots have the mass to completely stop them dead in their tracks, and then they become a lot easier to tie down and kill. So watch out for that tactic in this one. In the center, march Hellebron, a Death Hag, and a host of Witch Elves on foot. The blood sacrifices will be poor today. They're fighting bones and dust, but with the rise of Footlords comes combos we used to not see very often. The Cursed Blade and the Gaze of Cain Murder Party means she is a scary duelist with a Mortis-like effect. Nowhere near as broken as she was on launch, but still a serious threat. And the Witch Elves will try to rampage the constructs, while Hellebron and the Death Hag wail on top of them. Sorceress with Blade Wind, certainly not a meta choice, but a very fun spell designed to clear out lightly armored chaff in a storm of swords, and some Shades, and Doomfire Warlocks over on the left flank. Shades have lots of armor piercing, they have the stock so they can move up unseen, both very useful traits, and then the Doomfire Warlocks themselves, they've been nerfed kind of into oblivion, but they're not a horrendous light cav unit, just probably overpriced for what they do at this point. They were also pretty broken on launch, so I guess it's not surprising they got that nerf hammer. CA isn't always the best at using a scalpel to fine-tune. They seem to trend towards either stupid busted or unusable at launch, and then tell those units to pound sand when the first wave of patches come. A lighter touch when it comes to balancing, maybe releasing them so they're not broken in the first place, would probably serve them well. But here come the Screaming Skull Catapults, and they're going after the Witch Elves. Those units need to be gone from the field ASAP. Brides of Cain are a problem for the Tomb Kings because what they do is they'll rampage your most expensive units like Settra or the Khemrian Warsphinx. Then the Shades and the rest of the armor piercing can all focus fire on them, and even Settra and a War Kitty with over 100 armor will not last long under those withering salvos. So definitely important to make sure the Witch Elves are gone early. That's why the Horsemen are focusing fire on them, and they have low armor. They just have that dodge physical resistance, so they will definitely take a lot of damage from skirmish fire on the way in. Cold One Chariots, Hellebron, and the Death Hag moving straight into melee combat, venerating Cain, cracking open some bones, getting at that sweet, juicy marrow, and the infantry simply cannot stand in the face of all this fury. Hellebron is a blender. Tomb King's infantry is not exactly known for being great at holding. You just bring a lot of fodder and let the constructs do the work. So the Khemrian Warsphinx and Settra have a lot on their plate in this one. The King of Kings is getting aggressive where he can, staying away from the Brides of Cain, and he's gone into the Dread Spears, but this is exactly what Falcon wants to see. He wants these Cold One Chariots to chase after Settra the Imperishable and tie him down. Now, there's not a lot on this side that would do a ton of damage to him, but still, getting him bogged down in the middle of a bunch of Dread Spears prevents him from doing what he wants to do, which is cycle charge and quickly get rid of all the fodder so the Witch Elves and the more important units can be focused on. And the Brides of Cain are getting pounded by these Screaming Skull catapults at the moment, down past half HP. Necro Knights moving into the rear. Nice Soul Blight coming out of the Doomfire Warlocks, and the Cold One Chariots were right there. And they wanted to put pressure on the Shades alongside the Screaming Skull catapult. That could have been a fear route for the Shades pretty quick. But now the Necro Knights might have gotten a little bit aggressive on that side. Here in the center, Blade Wind popping through some Skeleton Spearmen, Settra going through, War Kitty bouncing into the Cold One Chariots in the background, and the Necropolis Knights have unleashed their fury, and they'll be spitting some poison, spitting some game, munching their way through this depleted regiment of Dread Spears. Murderous Prowess has popped army-wide. The Dark Elves will be much more ferocious in melee combat for a short duration. Tomb King's got to worry about that because their Skeleton Spearmen and their Skelly Boys are just not lasting very long in the melee grind. Lesser Doombolt raining down from the Doomfire Warlocks on top of the Khemrian Warsphinx, and this is what you have to be so cognizant of if you're playing against a Witch Elf kind of build. Look at these Necro Knights. They wanted to get aggressive. They did a good job of charging and making those Shades move, but they stayed too long. They tried to escape, but it only took a couple attacks from those Witch Elves, and they were rampaged. Now, they're bogged down in amongst Dread Spears, and that's just not a fight they'll do well in. Necropolis Knights have to be kept moving. They do not have enough durability to hold and fight for a long time. Monstrous Cavalry, even the ones that have high armor, just do not survive in prolonged melee combat well. They have to be kept moving. But the Khemrian Warsphinx is great for that, and the only thing that can pin him down are the Witch Elves or Cold One Chariots, and there are none nearby, so he has free reign to bounce through the Dread Spears and reap a path of destruction through their ranks. Doomfire Warlocks diving into the rear. Dark Elves have compromised the rear at this point, shutting down the Screaming Skull catapults, both of them. One of them is still online, but probably not for long with the Cold One Chariots, Death Hag, and Hellebron very nearby. And the Tomb Kings basically have to sack that side because they don't want any part of dueling Hellebron, the Death Hag, and those Witch Elves. It'll be pretty disastrous engagement for them. And the Necro Knights look like they're probably about to crumble out, so at this point, it's all about freeing up whatever units they can. Blade Wind coming down on the Spearmen, doing some good damage there, taking them down to about half HP, and all the Horsemen are online. Now, we've seen it over the last year or so. The meta has been fairly straightforward in that aspect, that Skirmish Cavalry is a huge deal, and if you're playing against 3 Witch Elves, Skirmish Cav could end up being your saving grace, because it's one of the reliable ways to kill them. My god, look at that charge! When the Khemrian Warsphinx manages to line itself up on the flank of an enemy unit and run through the entire regiment, put out some serious damage, and it did so there alongside Settra. But the Necro Knights are on their last legs, and it looks like they will crumble out completely at this point. The Asps will go join Asaf in the afterlife, and it looks like the Dark Elves are starting to gain a bit of a lead here. The 2 really important units for the Tomb Kings are still alive. Settra and the Khemrian Warsphinx are doing well, but they're quickly losing their support. Cold One Chariots caught out by the Necro Knights in the rear, though, and they cannot escape. The poison is lowering their speed down past 60, and that makes it easy for the Necro Knights to prey on them. They don't have halberds, so they don't have the bonus versus large that would allow them to kill them quicker, but it's looking like, yeah, one of the models just went down. Might be able to finish off that unit completely, but the Witch Elves are right there, and oh my god, on contact, they gave them the bad touch, and the Sneaky Snakes have to commit to melee now because they are rampaged by that madness of Cain. That is why Witch Elves are an obscenely good unit. They only took 1 attack, and that was it. Unit is pinned down, but this could be a boon for the Tomb Kings here because the Ushabti just got summoned behind, and now it is a brutal engagement for the Dark Elves. They have nowhere to go, completely surrounded by bonus versus infantry constructs, and it's actually going to end up being a complete massacre on this side of the battlefield. Witch Elves have nowhere to go. They got General Kenobi'd. Hello there. The Ushabti showed up, and it is all business for them, carving a bloody swath through these Dark Elves. Mass rout on this side, and that'll leave Hellebron and the Death Hag, and the other units a little bit isolated in the center. Now, when I say isolated, there's still a decent amount of the Dark Elf army left. Both sides are in tatters, only 5 minutes in, as Warhammer 2 battles typically go. These things are usually finished up pretty quick. Gaze of Cain murder party, everybody's invited. Come on, pile in, let's get some dueling going. And this is bad for Settra and the Khemrian Warsphinx because they are completely tied down by the Cold One Chariots. They don't have the mass to escape. Settra finally manages to extricate himself from the situation, but that Khemrian Warsphinx is dropping low pretty quick. Witch Elves might be able to make that Warsphinx rampage a second time. Shades are firing in with the 18 or 20 models they have remaining, but that's still a lot of damage. They can put out a lot of armor piercing. They can send the way of that 100+ armor construct. Ushabti will crumble out pretty soon here, but the Asps are coming in. Settra is going after the Shades, realizing the threat they pose, and now it's a blob fight in the center. And blob fights, when you have Hellebron, typically favor the Dark Elves because of her murder party and because of her cursed blade. She'll be draining life from any unit nearby because she's almost always winning in melee combat. And Settra's a bit torn here. He wants to go help out the Khemrian Warsphinx because if that crumbles out, it could be GG for the Tomb Kings, but he also doesn't want to allow those Shades to come back to the fold and start firing in again. Khemrian Warsphinx leadership appears to be rallying. The Necro Knights have plunged into the fray to give it a little bit more space. Even the Skeleton Horsemen now, out of ammunition, just trying to provide a little bit more mass, a little bit more punching power. Wrath of Petra going down, and with the fury of 1,000 suns, may the Dark Elves burn away like the heathens of old. Yeah, Dreadspirit just got completely shattered by that. That was a really nice cast from Settra. Got about 25 kills. Not a lot of infantry left on either side. Beautiful charge coming in. 100 charge bonus. Completely shattering the Brides of Cain there. Mass rout on both sides. Crumbling on the Tomb King side, which I guess is their equivalent of a mass rout. And the bounce bar is a little bit in favor of the forces of Ganeth. But now, Settra can maybe do some psycho-charging here. The Cold One Chariots are breaking off, and the Skeleton Horsemen can chase them to the edges of the map. So if they can get rid of this last unit of Cold One Raptor Chariots, then they might be in a situation where they can just charge Hellebron into the next dimension, into Age of Sigmar. But there's not a lot left on either side. The War Kitty appears to be hanging on for dear life. I want chicken, I want liver, Meow Mix, please deliver. One more charge coming in. Looks like they might be able to break off that Cold One Chariot, but Murder Party comes down for the third time this battle. Hellebron and the Death Hag fighting back to back alongside the Dark Elf Sorceress. Chariots broke off. Skeleton Horsemen can chase them. Oh, but the Khemrian Warsphinx is so low, and Hellebron is hitting like a truck. Now, the advantage the Tomb Kings have here, of course, is the fact that both of these units remaining are bonus versus infantry, and they're fighting Footlords. But neither are incredible duelists. Khemrian Warsphinx doesn't actually have incredibly high melee attack against single entities. Kind of just doesn't land a lot of attacks against single entities. It's a lot better against big blocks of infantry, but with a Blade Wind coming down just for a little bit more damage, the Bounce War was in favor of Ganeth. Now Hellebron is breaking. Khemrian Warsphinx manages to land an attack on the Death Hag, and now Hellebron is going for a ride on Death Knight. God damn, that looks so janky. That does not look good. I get that it's hard to come up with an animation that makes sense when a mammoth or a chariot is running through a footlord, but wow, that looks super strange. Like, I don't actually have a good solution here. I'd be curious to hear what you guys have to think about that stuff. How can they make it so that someone like Ungrim, who's standing in the way of a mammoth, he obviously doesn't have the mass to stop its momentum completely. Should he just be pushed along the ground and just not be knocked over? How do you make that look good? I'm really not sure. But regardless, really close game there up until the end. Khemrian Warsphinx landed a lucky attack on the Death Hag. Maybe it shouldn't be that lucky considering it is an armor-piercing bonus versus infantry specialist. But like I said, typically doesn't fare incredibly well in duels. It's usually much better in an infantry grind. But it was amazing that game. I mean, seriously, the Khemrian Warsphinx, the War Kitty was fantastic. Settra was awesome. Both got around 2,000 damage value. The Necro Knights, one of them was misplayed for sure. I definitely blundered my first Necro Knight. I wanted to go after the Shades and prevent them from firing at my War Kitty and my other important units, but I spent too much time in that engagement meant that the Brides of Cain were able to imbue the madness of Cain. Rampage on Necro Knight means a dead Necro Knight, and that was pretty painful. You can see how good Witch Elves are in this build, and the idea for Falcon's play here was really smart. Chariots to tie down the constructs, Witch Elves to rampage the constructs, and then just wail on them with Hellebron and the Death Hag, and it almost worked out. As I said, these were kind of experimental builds. I think a legit Tomb King's build here would drop when Necro Knight gets some more Nehekara Horsemen, and maybe make a few other changes, but the Miming Skull Catapults were pretty awesome this game at killing the Witch Elves, doing a lot of damage to them, and it was cool to see that deadly foot squad of Hellebron and the Death Hag fighting, and alongside the Brides of Cain, get the Rampage going, get Hellebron slicing into the high-value targets like Settra and the Khemrian Warsphinx, and they will start dropping low very quickly. Well played to Falcon. You'll be seeing more of our matches very soon. Hope you guys enjoyed. Peace out. A-Town.